Hello everyone and welcome to the Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers and I'm joined by Gail Schimmel.
Hello Fiona.
Hi Gail. I don't know who has a gloomier face this morning, me or you.
We are not our usual cheerful selves when it comes to the question of our writing lives this morning. Why are you looking so gloomy, Fiona?
Gail, I am suffering from the demon of comparison, where I've been comparing myself to a couple of brilliant writers that I've been reading lately and just thinking, it's all over, I'm never going to measure up, it's too late for me, I shouldn't even try. And that's not a good place to be in, because usually when I see someone doing something really well, it kind of inspires me. It makes me think, oh, it is doable. Yes. I can also do it. I can stretch for that thing, reach further and do more. And for some reason this week, it's just been, oh, this is too good. I'm never going to get there. I just don't have it in me, that kind of gloomy feeling. And I'm trying to fight my way out of it. And I have a feeling that our guest might inspire me out of it. But why do you have a long face this morning?
So very similar feelings. Perhaps starting in a slightly different place of having a hard week with my day job, having a hard week with the juggling of parenting and really at this stage of parenting, as you know, it's more about being an Uber driver. And we had a very Uber drivery weekend. But I've got a lot on my plate, and so I'm trying to be kind to myself. You listening to me trying to be kind to myself. I have a proper full-time job. I have these Uber driving parenting responsibilities. We have this podcast, and we've been working quite hard on it over the last few weeks. And I'm not getting to the writing. I've been doing the editing and that, but I'm not getting to writing.
Right.
And I'm feeling a bit like, why am I even trying to do this? I'm not that good. What is in it? I'm not making a fortune from it. I'm talking about my own writing, not the Caine Gail writing. Like, why am I even bothering? And there's a little part of my brain going, well, why? Because I'm quite a believer in, that being able to drop something is a talent in itself, that it's perfectly respectable. I'm not you've got to always stick to everything. You've got to win. You don't give up. What's that irritating saying? Something about quitters. Anyway, I'm a big believer in quitting. If something's not serving you, quit it. It really doesn't matter. And I learned that when I dropped out maths in matric. And part of me is going, you'll just feel so much less stressed if you stop writing or if you stop trying to write your own books. And then another part of me is going, don't be ridiculous. That's the thing that brings you joy.
Yeah.
Like you, I'm sure I'm going to come through this. But yeah, not feeling it this week.
Yeah, it's not a great place to be in, but I kind of feel it's maybe normal. I mean, it's not normal on a month-by-month basis, but it is normal to have these low lows.
Remember what Damon Galgut said to us last week. I mean, he flounders around feeling insecure and unsure what he's writing at the beginning of every book and then wins a Booker Prize. Fiona, maybe our next books will be the Booker Prize winners. Maybe this is a necessary part of our process.
So, Gail, to keep your mind off your troubles, what have you been reading or watching or listening to lately?
I don't know if it is keeping my mind off my troubles, because like you say, when you read something very good, it can make you doubt yourself and even more. But I've been reading, I've read, it's the second book of this writer that I'm reading this year. And it's a fantasy writer called V.E. Schwab. I don't know if you say Schwab or Schwab, I suppose, depending what country you're in. But she is an extraordinary fantasy writer. I've read quite a lot of hers, but certainly not everything. And I read earlier this year, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, which is a kind of lesbian vampire book and is really just magnificent. And now I'm reading a book which is often, I think, it comes up in searches as her best-known book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Mm-hmm. And I had read the blurb so much that I'd convinced myself I'd read it. And then when I was looking for something to read, I was like, have you actually read this? And I looked on my Kindle, which is where I would have, and I haven't read it. And it is a book about a woman who makes a deal with the devil. It's the 1700s. She is about to be wed to a man she has no interest in. She is hungry for life and independence, and she calls out to the gods of the night, which she has been warned you should not pray to the gods who answer you after dark. Mm-hmm. And one of the gods, who I think is the devil, answers her and gives her eternity. No. She's wished for freedom. He gives her freedom for as long as she wants it, but everyone who meets her forgets her. Uh-huh. So the invisible life of Addie LaRue. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then obviously that's your premise.
Yeah.
And then there's a little twist that comes along. And it's lovely. It's a quirky idea, and she writes so well. And I just, in checking for speaking about it, whether V.E. Schwab was a man or a woman, I discovered she's a 38-year-old woman, which has added slightly to my depression because she's written an extraordinary number of extraordinary books. If you're into fantasy and you haven't read her, go and read it, Fiona. Go and read something by her. She's wonderful. What are you reading?
I have just finished a strange little book called Glyph. That's like cliff with a G, by Ali Smith. And it's on the Dublin long list at the moment. It's a dystopian novel, quite short. And it's set in the UK. And you can say it's kind of set now, but it's not completely our reality. It is a very intrusive surveillance state where immigrants and people who are just a little bit different are harassed and policed, and they basically are not allowed to settle anywhere. It's as though you have become homeless. So even if you have a home of your own, the authorities will come in, draw a red line right around it, and move you off. And wherever you go, they will follow you and they will draw a red line around you, and you'll be forced to move off and move on and just keep moving and not be allowed to settle for the rest of your life. So it's this kind of very unsettling, unpleasant kind of reality. And the protagonists are children, just to make one even more uneasy. And their mother, something bad has happened to their mother. She's kind of been removed from their lives, and their quite nice stepfather has also been removed from their lives, and it's just them and a horse.
Them and a horse?
There's a horse. The horse is called Glyph.
Okay, I'm out. At this point, I'm removing myself from even thinking about this book.
I'm not a horse person.
But you have to worry about the horse dying.
No, yeah, you do have to worry about the horse, but I'll tell you the horse is fine. But it's unsettling. It's a different kind of future that is actually quite probable and possible. And with what's going on in America right now, and these anti-immigrant movements and these anti-anyone who's a little bit different movements, it disturbed me. It unsettled me in a good way.
In a good way?
Yes. In a way that I was happy to have read it, even though it was not a very enjoyable reading experience.
Well, Fiona, you've left me thoroughly confused by that. Thank you for that.
So an author who writes unsettling and very enjoyable books is our guest today. Our guest today is Nadia Davids. Nadia is a playwright and novelist. She won the Philip Leverhulme Prize. Her plays have won multiple Fleur du Cap Theatre Awards. She was the president of PEN South Africa until 2024. She won the Caine Prize for a short story, Bridling. Her first novel, An Imperfect Blessing, was shortlisted for the Etisalat and UJ Prize. And now her new novel, Cape Fever, is being distributed in South Africa by Jonathan Ball Publishers, published by Simon and Schuster, I do believe. Mm-hmm. And we are so excited to catch Nadia on her whirlwind tour of South Africa. Nadia, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much. It is a wonderful pleasure to be here.
Nadia, we've been watching you on social media, so we think that we know the answer to this question. Mm-hmm. But how has your writing week been?
My writing week has been non-existent.
That's what we thought.
But I feel as though I don't feel like I've written in earnest for several months now. And I think maybe it's the same for most writers when they finish a work and it's now sort of been sent out into the world. I feel quite spent. And I've been fiddling away with the short story and sort of spending a little bit of time on working on a keynote address for a conference at UCC. But long form writing is not in the works right now. So I've been reading though, which I think of as the other side of writing. So I still feel like it's work and craft. Yes.
And when you are in the thick of writing a novel or a short story or a collection, what does that daily process look like for you?
I have 2 children, so I get up as early as I possibly can. And if I am in a stretch of writing that feels as though it has its own quickening and its own pulse and as though it has been driven by something a little bit bigger than me, I'm able to get up because I'm living with the text in a very specific way. You know, I go to sleep thinking about it. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning. I'm eager to meet the page. What happens when I'm actually at the desk is anyone's guess. And I'm unable to not write in longhand because I think that there's a very important relationship, a tactile relationship between the pen and the hand and the eye and the brain and how one manufactures sentences and thinks through things. And I like that kind of analog quality to writing, but my actual handwriting has deteriorated so badly over the years that my own writing is illegible to me by the time it comes to typing it up. So I have to move very quickly where the words are just kind of sort of reminding me of what I had written initially. And then I type. So I write in longhand first and then I try and type up within sort of 20, 30 minutes of having written.
So in one session, you're writing that section longhand and then you moving to...
Yes, and I find it really helpful because the typing becomes its own editing process as well. But I think most people, find it.
And are you driven in that time that you're writing, are you driven by you want to get a particular idea out there, or do you have a word count, or what are you working towards in a session of writing?
I don't have a word count session. It's often what I think of, I suppose this is the theatrical sort of training. I think of it as a beat. You know, there's an emotional beat that I want to get through and I'm trying to work through that, or there's a scene beat that I'm trying to work through. But I find that I read craft books voraciously, and yet they bring me no direction apart from comfort. And I read them and I feel profoundly comforted by the fact that somebody else has struggled as mightily to find a method. So I find that each project sort of directs its own sail.
That's very nice.
And I have to wait and see what that rhythm and that method is going to be. And my responsibility is to show up and to catch the text in some way.
Yeah. Nadia, we love a prodigy and a wunderkind, and you are both of those things. I was so interested to read that when you were in matric, you took a play of your own creation to the Grahamstown Festival, where I believe it did well. How do you relate to that 17, 18-year-old? How do you relate to that early work? And did you always know you were going to be a writer of some sort?
I always wanted to be a writer. I loved books with such a passion, and they were my refuge and my joy and, my whole imaginative life. And I was very lucky that I had parents who were deeply encouraging of reading and loved to read themselves. And my sister was 2 years older than me, was also a voracious reader. So we had that kind of wonderful exchange of being excited about books together. I sometimes think that my kind of preoccupations and passions have not changed that much since I was 17 or 6 or they've just sort of, maybe they've deepened or they've accumulated more knowledge. And, as we get older and we write, I suppose we develop a stronger discipline. We know more, we've lived more, and those things come to bear. But, I've always been fascinated by Cape Town and the sort of rich seam and sediment of that city. And that has been a huge source of inspiration for me. Yeah, I feel very, very lucky to have been born there in that sense.
Do you not think that wherever you were born, you're a writer? You would have found the magic of any city you were born in, or any place?
I would hope so, but I think that having been born in Cape Town when I was born in it, and having, been very young and lived through a state of emergency there, political state of emergency, and having been raised in the Cape Town's Muslim community, has given me a very particular landscape and a very particular history and an understanding and a feeling and a sense for cultural memory and loss and resilience that has been very meaningful to me. And I would love to think that it would have been similarly animated in another space. So yeah, possibly. But I just do feel that I'm lucky to feel a very strong creative connection to the place that I come from. Yeah.
And did you have a clear sense always of that you were going to do both theatre and novel and short story writing? Did you ever feel that you had to pick one, or that you pivoted in any way?
Short stories were a surprise to me, and I didn't ever think of them as being a possibility at all. And then I was incredibly lucky because I did a short story a creative writing course with James Coetzee when I was in my honours year, and that was the space in which I think many of us started writing short stories for the first time, very badly, but it was still, it was an opportunity to start developing a different kind of writing form or craft or technique. And I loved reading short stories, and I didn't think of them as something that I could do. But I'd always loved performance, and I love the performance of voice and what it's able to do. I love the way in which a performance of voice is able to carry a story through character. So yeah, they feel very closely aligned to me, and I like to use different. These arms can be edited. I like to use different tactics from theatre to inform novel writing and vice versa.
I'm very interested listening to you speak in whether it's one of our common questions we ask people, whether they're plotters or pantsers. So do you write by the seat of your pants, or do you plot it out? I'm interested from you in particular, that question, but also how it differs if you're writing a play, if you're writing a short story, and if you're writing a novel.
I like to think of myself as a planner, but I mean a plotter, but So I've been thinking about this lately, how in theatre I often think of the opening image as being the question and the closing image as being the answer in some way, and that there's something that flows between those two images. And sometimes I will have a very clear opening and closing image, and then it's about how do I get from one place to the other, and that the mystery is contained inside those 2 points, and all sorts of things can happen between those 2 poles. So in that sense, I have a plot in some way, or I have a beginning and I have an ending. And sometimes the ending will change. And certainly with Cape Fever, the ending did change. It was a very different ending. And so I think one has to stay open. And that's what's quite useful about a plot and having it planned out, is that you feel safe because you have a structure, but you also have a certain freedom because you can dismantle your own house. It's fine, because then you can rebuild it as well.
And when you say you have that structure, do you have a beat by beat plan, or did you just have that beginning and end and then you go along?
With plays, I sometimes have a beat by beat plan. With Cape Fever, with this novel particularly, it felt as if there was a life beyond one that I could map out, and I had to listen very carefully for where the characters wanted to go and what they wanted to do. And sometimes they would surprise me, and I would discover certain things in the process of writing a scene. And I was like, oh, all right, okay, we'll go this way, and then see. So it's a mixture of both. Like, I like to have the structure, but I also feel one has to kind of have that freedom of movement.
I want to talk about your short story that won the Caine Prize in 2024, Bridling. So just to briefly introduce the listener to it, it's a story about a theatrical production, installation, artwork featuring women who are being subjected to various forms of cruelty that women have been subjected to throughout the ages. And one of them is the scold's bridal. Did you see a scold's bridal somewhere? Did you see a picture of a scold's bridal? What was the seed of that story for you?
That's exactly it. It was seeing an image of a scold's bridal and just being stunned, because it was something that I think that was used in Europe until at least the sort of late 1700s. And then it was horrifically used with enslaved women in the Americas right up until the 1800s and later. And I mean, it's a vicious contraption of torture and cruelty that literally is designed to stop women's speech. And if speech is had, sometimes there's a contraption of some kind that holds the tongue down or causes bleeding. And it seemed to me, I mean, some things operate far beyond the kind of the realm of symbolism, but this struck me as being both kind of treacherously real and horrifically symbolic at the same time. And I wondered about this image and how it could be used in a literary text that was also sort of theatrical.
You don't shy away from difficult images, difficult topics, hard things. And I'm interested in that. How do you find the strength to lean into? I mean, that's a good example. If I see an image like that, I immediately want to go and think about kittens and sunshine so that I don't have to think about the horrific things in the world. Like, I want to curl up in a ball and pretend I never saw that.
Right.
But you lean right into it. How do you find the strength to do that?
I don't even think that it is strength, to be honest with you. It's impossible for me to not think about those things. And I suppose writing about them creatively is a form of metabolizing the horror of encountering them. So it's much less brave than I wish it was, than leaning in. It's probably a process by which I'm trying to make sense of things myself. Yeah. Or not make sense of it, process something as well. Which is not to say that I think of my writing as therapy, because I really don't.
That's interesting that you don't, because a lot of people do.
Yeah, no, it's...
Why? Do you seem to feel quite strongly about that?
Yeah, I think that's what my journal is for.
Okay.
Yeah, the private self and the journal stuff is for that. But my responsibility as a writer is to entertain and provoke and interest, hopefully, and move the reader. It's not to trauma dump on them.
I'm very interested that you journal. Because I often feel I don't want to journal because it's going to take the same energy that I use for writing, and I'm petrified of using that energy up because it's finite for me. Talk to us about, do you journal every day?
Every day. Every day. And it's the morning, it's the first thing that I do, and I'm just, it's 3 pages, and I'm just sort of writing down whatever the thoughts are for the day or the morning, or whatever's taken me through the night and what needs to come out to start the day.
And does that then feed into your writing?
No, it becomes part of the illegible mass of text that just gather dust and eventually get tossed away. These are not diaries that anybody's going to return to at any point and think that there's some wonderful pearls among them. There's nothing there. There are lists of things to do, and then there's sort of 3 pages of just text of, I need to do this, or this is happening, or I'm tired, or I didn't sleep well, or I slept fantastically, or I think I should cook this today, or it's probably like a mixture of I don't know, psychic dumping and the entirely boring quotidian.
It's terrible.
No, it's horrible.
I've read a bit about how the idea for Cape Fever came to you, and that it wasn't a straightforward process at all. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Gosh, I had this, I woke up in 2007, 2008, and the idea came to me. It was sort of in a half dream state, and it felt very, very clear, and the outline was wonderful. It was like, there are two women, they're in this house. One is an employer, one is the employed. The employer offers to write letters on behalf of the employed, but she lies and says she can't read, and it was all sort of garbled. It's a necessary fiction. I don't know why, and they become entangled, and I'm not sure. And it felt so alive and urgent, and there was a kind of an electricity to it. And I thought, I'm going to be able to sit down and write this, and it's going to come very, very quickly. And I sat down that day, and I got precisely nowhere. It was not there. And I was very confused, because usually when a story or an idea announces itself to me with that kind of clarity and energy, I'm able to really connect with it and follow the trail. And I just couldn't. And I sort of gave it about a year where I kept returning to this text and trying to figure it out. And it wasn't there. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's somebody else's idea, and I need to let it go. And I wrote other things. I wrote An Imperfect Blessing, and there were other plays, and I finished my thesis. But I kept on nodding terms with this particular text. And it was only 2016 when I suddenly realized when it was set and where it was set. And once I understood that the character of Soraya was who she was, that she came from a version of the Burgkap in Cape Town, once I understood that it was set in 1920 and that it was a post-World War I novel with a Gothic edge, suddenly things began to move in a different way. And I always say before that, I felt as though I was communicating with the characters through very thick glass, and I could just sort of see them in that, that sort of Murano glass. I could sort of see the outline of them, but I didn't know who they were. But the moment those sort of grounding factual things fell into place, they were sharp, and suddenly it was like, oh, okay, I know exactly who this is, and I know what they sound like, and I know the streetscape, I know the house. Yeah, things came into view. So it was a long process.
And do you think subconsciously some part of your brain always knew that piece and just didn't tell your conscious? Or do you think it was because it's very interesting the way you couldn't see them and then they came into focus?
I think I needed to be older to write the book.
Okay.
And I think part of that has to do with understanding the reach of grief differently, and understanding the kind of longue durée of history in a different way, becoming acquainted with it through life. And I also needed to develop as a writer. It was a difficult piece to write, and I think I lacked the maturity at the time that the idea came. I needed to have a very different understanding of text and a kind of a different discipline to write. It's a slim novel, and it required a lot of discipline to keep it slim. And it also, I needed to do much more reading about and understanding about Cape Town. It's an estranged version of it. It's sort of held at a little bit of a distance, but there's a lot of the history of the Cape is in that book, but I didn't want to be in a position of having to explain all of it. I wanted to be able to gesture at it. And I think that just comes with experience, It takes a while.
Do you think you needed to get the coming-of-age novel written first? Because An Imperfect Blessing is a coming-of-age novel, and I do wonder how much you were writing your own story or a version of your own story. Oh God,
yeah, no, that novel is just all the loving parts of childhood and adolescence, and it's a complete but it's such a sunlit, optimistic novel, and it's written in a very different moment, in a very different era for all of us, right? So, yeah, and it was joyful. I had huge joy writing that book. And it was wonderful to kind of reflect back on that time and the excitement of it and the exuberance and also all the moments of loss and how they'd been sort of newly reconfigured. And yeah, I had a lot of fun writing that book.
Do you think authors often need to have that sort of semi-personal Bildungsroman written first before they can go on to other things?
I wonder. I mean, I'm trying to think who hasn't done it that way. And no one's, I don't know. Maybe some who are very, I don't know, maybe there's a narcissism to it where people are like deeply interested in their own lives and then feel that they have to fictionalize around it.
I've now found myself wondering if there's a link between writers who journal and write that sort of first book, like
possibly, yeah.
that there is an experience of writing yourself.
Yeah.
Because my first book, I don't think was that. And yours, I don't think was that.
No, it wasn't. And I think more writers than we know have actually done it, but that first novel didn't see the light of day. Ended up in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
There we go.
Actually, that might change my answer. I'm interested when that Cape Fever setting and timing came to you. How anxiety-provoking was the idea of the research? Like, did you go, oh my goodness, it wants to be set in the 20s, now I've got to find out what things were like?
No, it was fine because I've always been interested in the 1920s and I've always been interested in that interwar period. And, I was teasing last night at the book launch, and it's my parents' fault for an overexposure to kind of English and British drama when I was a child growing up. So too many years of watching, I don't know, upstairs, downstairs. So I've always been interested in those sort of class dynamics are fascinating to me. But also I remembered reading, World War I poetry in school. And I remember the Wilfred Owen poem, and it was just one of the first times I really encountered, it's just that understanding this is a young person writing this, but it was futility, writing this poem, and he's just lost, I don't know how many friends in the trenches, and he talks about moving the body of this soldier out into the sun so that the sun can warm him. And then I think the final lines were just so, I must have been like 15 or 16 when I read them, but they were so devastating because he says, was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? And I thought, God, this is remarkable, because for me it was the most damning indictment of kind of the insanity of war and violence and empire imaginable. And so I think there were sort of early seeds of interest. Then there was like my fascination with the Gothic novel that, we all, read Jane Eyre, and now it's Wuthering Heights that everybody's rereading again. But all those books sort of fed in to the work. And then, of course, growing up in Cape Town, I had an interest in that time in my city, an interest about what it was like for my community during that time, what the colonial experience was. I was really fascinated to think through what District 6 was during that era, because it's a pre-removal era. It's outside the shadow of removal. It's at the kind of apex of its sort of bustling industrial kind of incredible hub of intellectual and creative life, along with sort of working life as well. So that was like, those sections actually, they were very joyful to think through. Yeah. But I also had thought about Mrs. Dalloway a lot, because I didn't realize, I think we all sort of rediscovered it kind of as a post-pandemic novel during the pandemic, is that we always all thought about it as this post-World War I novel, which of course it is, but it's scattered with characters who are recovering from the flu epidemic and who are rattled by it. And it was just so extraordinary to me how we'd all sort of just, that had passed out of kind of shared memory in a way.
Let's talk about the Gothic form for a moment, because I believe that the Gothic is having a revival in South African novel writing at the moment. There's there's Shabnam Khan's Lost Love of Akbar Manzil, there's Siphiwe Ndlovu's Creation of Half-Broken People. And the one thing they have in common is that they are set in periods of colonial history or involve periods of colonial history. What is the link? Why do you think it's a good fit, and why was it a good fit for you?
So I think I started thinking about this with my play, What Remains, which I was writing, I think, 2015, 2016. I think about the hauntology of Cape Fever and how that locks into kind of the Gothic sensibility as being it's a way in which people sort of metabolize the profound cruelty of colonialism, right? So the ways in which these characters experience hauntings is the idea of unsettled business and the idea of these spirits or these beings roaming the city who are, in a sense, they're there to hold people accountable for what has been done. So, that's the kind of invention of the category in the novel of the Grey Women, where they're figures of female rage, and they're there to disrupt and to remember and to move through the city as kind of the city's conscience. But the other Grey Women are out and about. They're frightening the government buildings. They're lurking in the shadows. They're frightening the horses of the men of the powerful, that kind of thing.
And that magical element, was that part of the initial idea, or was that something that took you by mistake?
No, it took me by surprise. And I think part of it was when I, again, realizing the time period in which it was set allowed for that to happen. But I mean, I'd also grown up in a community where, one speaks freely about ghosts and jinn and what is unsettled in the city, what is not. And the character of Soraya, she believes in these things unambiguously. My belief as the writer is that they are absolutely real to her. And also for me, they are ways in which she's processing political violence. But, I also think that in as much as there are all these actual ghosts in the novel, in some ways Alice Hassing is kind of the hungriest ghost of them all, and she's a ghost in her own life as she waits for this son that never seems able to return.
Soraya's big transgression, the thing that gets her sent into service in the first place, is storytelling. She tells a story that is too frightening for children. Why that? How did that idea interest you, and what were you exploring there?
Well, I mean, in the life of someone at that period, at 14, you would have been sent off to work, right? Invariably. But I wanted to give it a little bit of drama, and also that her parents are concerned. They feel that she needs to learn to stay within this realm. And so the storytelling is, it's getting her into trouble. She's frightening these children. People are terrified of bad luck. They're sort of running from her. And she does tell an absolutely petrifying story.
She
and it's
does,
horrific. And she has her, at the time, her great friend, who then later becomes her fiancé, Noor, sort of standing there, sort of absolutely, he's captivated by what she's saying and also very, very encouraging of it. And her parents are very protective of her, and they defend her against whatever the criticism is from everybody about these terrifying stories she's telling. But at the same time, there's a recognition that she needs to enter real life, and that real life is beckoning. And I think this is also very common then, and is regrettably, horrifically common for so many people now, that childhood is parceled out differently, and that childhood ends at different times. For those who are not kind of privileged and fortunate, work begins, responsibility starts, and
I'm taking a step back to process, because what you've said has reminded me of a question I had for you, which is that you've talked in other interviews about entering quite a trance-like state at some parts of writing. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And most importantly, how do we get there?
We all go into that stage, right? Where something
very occasionally.
No, I mean, it's so rare. And then when it happens, it feels like magic, doesn't it? And it feels as if the mists are thinning, and suddenly everything is reachable and within sight. But I mean, it's designed that way, isn't it? To make us keep returning. So
tell us more about that thought.
Well, it's just, I mean, I was in theatre, we have that saying, you know, it's 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. And so you put in all these hours and hours desperately hoping for the 10 minutes that come where things flow and make sense and something is unlocked and things fall into place. And it's as if you're in this sort of magical realm of your own making, but also it's not yours and you're stepping into it and you can just as easily be flung out of it. You're there for a temporary amount of time. But, a friend was saying to me, she thinks that there's a relationship between kind of clairvoyance and writing. And, I said, I suppose there is, in so much as both are attempting to understand what somebody else is thinking and feeling, and put that into words. And so I've often seen this happen in real time in a rehearsal room. And it's a magnificent thing to watch, where it happens with actors when they are finding their character. And it's a very slow process through rehearsal, where they're building and they're reaching and they're going through different exercises. And what's wonderful about this is that there are actual techniques and processes that seem to work to unlock these things. And once they make contact with the character, once the character's invited in, it stays. And then it becomes a kind of a muscle memory where they develop and move forward with it, yeah.
And that trance state, does it happen for you when you're in that writing by hand phase?
Yes. Sometimes it will happen in editing. But that feels sharper. It feels like a different form of thinking, because the eye is on how to improve a sentence, not to channel it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about having one's voice appropriated. But this dynamic between Soraya and Mrs. Hutton, where Mrs. Hutton takes over supposedly just as a scribe. She's just going to help Soraya write to her fiancé and help Soraya read the letters back from her fiancé. But there's a line that struck me where Soraya says something like, "She has taken my eye and Noah's too." That idea of appropriation of someone's voice as a colonial act. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I once said, Alice Hassing is a terrifying figure who is not all terrible. What I wanted to do with Alice Hassing was to have a figure who was complex and interesting and contradictory, who through the course of the novel extracts and takes from Soraya. She's an extraordinarily extractive person. She's deeply manipulative. She also has an insatiable need that nobody but her son can meet. She's in a fever dream of her own, of great pretense and deceit, in terms of keeping up appearances, but also living as this, in this space of colonial rulership in the city. And when she uses the technology of writing to take over Soraya's life. I mean, I was thinking a lot about missionary education, a lot about the kind of cannibalizing of the voices of people of color historically in our country, in my city, and the ways in which Soraya, who is canny and bright and invested and deeply understanding of her own circumstances, even she is astonished at the ease by which Alice Hassing is able to do this. Yeah. Soraya, at the same time, is very careful about what she tells her and what she conveys. So even though she's placed into this enormously disempowering situation, she's still able to retain her agency to some degree, and she's able to assert that. And she's good at guarding and protecting what she says should only belong to her. So it's a power struggle, and I always say the novel opens with the confession of a deceit. She says, "I come highly recommended to Mrs. Hassing through sentences I tell her I cannot read." So we're immediately told that she's lying to this woman, but she's not lying to us. And so we know that we're in her confidence, and that something is about to happen here. This
is something that interests me greatly, and I'm going to be careful how to express it because I don't want to give away any spoilers for this book.
Yeah.
But it is a book that has elements of hope in it. And conventionally, the colonial historical novel told from the perspective of the subaltern is not hopeful. But you've chosen to do something a little bit different. Can you talk us through some of those choices that you made?
Yeah. And I don't think about postcolonial novels as being novels of despair at all. I mean, I think about them as being novels of great agency, of asserting certain histories, of resisting and of resistance. And I also understand resistance to work in epochs, and that there are moments of reprieve and there are moments of respite. And so I did want to give Soraya moments within the text and in her journey, and then also with the ending, where we understand that she is in a moment of reprieve, but she understands that too. And she's shoring up for the long fight ahead. And there is a long fight ahead, and anybody with a kind of passing knowledge of South African history or Cape Town history specifically knows what is to come and what's on the horizon. But I think it's important for us to understand that even in the kind of bleakest or darkest times, people love and they cherish each other and they are hopeful and they tend to that hope. They have to be, right, in order to survive.
So if the charge was brought against you of an unreasonable hope or a utopianism,
yeah,
how would you respond to that?
It's not impossible that this could have happened. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. And we are writers of fiction, so we are in the business of the impossible. It's our job to imagine that as well. And also there were, people made art and they had political lives. I mean, there are many unlikely possibilities for a person's life. Also, and I think this is very important, I had no wish to exert further violence on Soraya. I loved her and I love her still. And I wanted her to have not anything like revenge, but I wanted her to have justice, some kind of justice. And that meant giving her and affording her the chance of some sort of hope and a life rich with meaning. Yeah.
So even though the arc of colonial history was terrible,
yeah,
within that arc, there were moments, especially on an individual level or familial level, where there was hope, there was joy, there was success, yes. There were outliers who did really well.
Yeah, I mean, which is, these are people who succeeded despite things, not because of them. Mm. And I think that's that's the entire nature of struggle, right? Also, I mean, I also come out of and I think this is what I was hoping to convey about Soraya as well as a person, is that I come out of a community that we understand ourselves as we're on a historical continuum always. So we're all raised with the understanding of what people have had to do before, for however long that is, in order to create conditions of freedom. And at a certain point, you start to become one of those people who is creating the conditions of freedom for the next generation. So you spend some of your life in gratitude to kind of the ancestral pathways, and that at a certain point you move from being the beneficiary of that into being the active ancestor to be. Yeah.
I love that.
Mm. Although quite a burden to have to be an ancestor to be.
A privilege, not a burden. A privilege.
I'm going to take us a little bit off the book itself, and I want to ask you about an aspect of your life that I am jealous of, but also wary of, which is the idea you've done a number of writing residencies. And I've always thought that sounds like the dream, but also would I get there and not be able to write a word because it's now you've got all the time in the world and you can write and that's what you're expected to do. Right. Can you tell us how it's been for you? Whether you think writers should do it, what you think it adds to the writing life?
I've always enjoyed and loved, I think I've done 3 residencies, and the first one was before I had children. So I just had a really rock and roll attitude about time. I didn't care. And so I was very happy just to sort of hang out talking to the other writers and hearing about their work and occasionally doing a page or 2 here and taking long walks, and it was glorious. And I developed beautiful relationships that I still have today. So there's also that. There's the idea of forging community, right, in these spaces. And that's fantastic. And it's wonderful. You get to meet writers from different parts of the world, and they're writing in different forms, and they've got a different approach to their work. And that part is fantastic. After having children, I took that time a lot more seriously, and I became much more kind of militant about the writing practice. And they're different forms work at different times. So with one in particular, a beautiful residency for women, Hedgebrook, is so centered on the idea of they call it radical hospitality. And so because it's for women identifying writers, historically the idea would be that these women are often the ones who are sort of bearing the domestic burden. And the idea is to kind of release you of all of that so that your entire focus you almost go back into sort of, I guess, a childlike state where you are taken care of. There's a sense of care. So you get these amazing little picnic baskets in the morning that is your lunch pail. And then these things are done for you so that you can then not think about anything else but your book. And
like men.
Well, this is the thing. I imagine this was part of the animating impulse, right? Is that through these great artists who are just churning out. This Tolstoy had 9 children, but somehow wrote. Yeah. So I think that's it does require a certain measure of discipline to not sort of get into the glorious space of the communal, which is also generative in its own way. I know some writers who, when they've gone to residencies, it's been a time of rest as well. And I think that's also fine and good.
The other way that you have involved yourself as a writer in communal activities is through pen. And I'm interested in, first of all, to explain to the listener a little bit what pen is, but also why you think an organization like that is important for writers, because we're quite insular creatures when it comes to our work. And the idea of an organization for writers is almost a little bit of a difficult idea for a writer. So why do you think that's important?
Well, precisely for that question of the insularity, right, that comes with, and the loneliness that comes from writing. It is important to be in community. I mean, I think it's essential. So Penn started in the kind of ashes of World War I. So it's 1920, I think, in 1921 in the UK, and it was initially designed to protect writers who were subject to any kind of threat from the state, from censorship, from imprisonment, from torture eventually, and to ensure that there was always the kind of free distribution of books between people. And it's grown subsequently, and so there are chapters throughout African continent, our continent, throughout Europe. There's a very big one in the US. And today the focus is on defending in the States, the focus is very much on defending writers against growing book banning, censorship. These things are happening at a state level, not yet at a federal level, but and then also looking at the ways in which writers are surviving when they're under siege, whether those writers are in Gaza or in Lebanon or Ukraine or in Sudan. I mean, the list is endless. And during my time at Penn South Africa, what we were trying to do was to build up an understanding that writers have a duty of care and responsibility to each other, particularly those of us that have the great fortune to live under liberal democracies where our freedom to write and to read is protected. And so one of the, I think, really helpful things that we did during our time was we had a podcast called The Empty Chair, and a lot of that was designed around the work that Pen International does, which is the headquarters in the UK, which was to focus on writers who are currently imprisoned, and to advocate for their release. Yeah. So it was very inspiring work, and it is unbelievable how people continue to write under the most, inhumane, catastrophic circumstances.
Nadia, we always like to ask our guests what they have been reading or watching or listening to lately that's made an impression on them.
So I've been carrying around a collection of short stories by my friend Lucy Caldwell called Intimacies. It's beautiful. She's a wonderful writer, and she's so good at honing in on these very, very small, micro, everyday moments of motherhood and relationship and a writing life and navigating an urban experience. It's a glorious writer because she mines everyday life for meaning in the most beautiful way. I also just finished Tariq Bakoni's Fire in Every Direction, which is a memoir about growing up Palestinian in exile and growing up queer. It's beautiful. And I'm really looking forward to my ultimate I love this show so much. It's coming back for the 3rd season. Lisa Kudrow's The Comeback. I don't know if you've ever watched it.
Yes, I've watched both seasons. I'm also looking forward to it.
I've been I just adore it, and I think it's so glorious. And it's one of my favorite television characters of all time. So I hear it's coming out again. And I'm very
Did you see the teaser that dropped last night?
I did not. No.
It's going to be all about AI, writing with AI.
Oh, we didn't even go there. Talk about horror.
Yes.
Talk about the horror that's coming. Never mind Scold's Bridal. We could have talked about AI.
Well, Nadia, we hope that everyone checks out Cape Fever. It's on all bookshelves right now in South Africa. It is a brilliant book, and I personally believe that it will and also deserves to scoop up all the awards in the next award season that it's eligible for. But thank you so much for fitting us in on this very busy book tour.
Thank you. What a joy to be here. Thank you for your beautiful questions.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you.
Fiona, every now and then we have a guest that makes me really sad that we don't have visuals for our podcast, and that we can't invite the listener into the room to feel the energy of that guest, because Nadia is, and I mean, we don't judge on looks in this podcast. We judge on intellect and books. But she is so beautiful and so elegant and so calm. I really, there's a peace in just being in her presence. Did you feel it?
I did. I did want her to slip me the name and address of her fountain of eternal youth.
Yes. So badly. Because she's not 20 years younger than us, but she looks 20 years younger than us. No offense to either of us.
Gail, that was a great chat. What did you get from it in particular?
So you and I have been talking a lot about process and thinking a lot about process recently. And I've written down something she said, which is that each project directs its own sail. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe it's something that's important to remember, that even if you've written a lot of books, even if you think you've found your groove, even if you think you know how you work, it may be that a new project requires a completely different approach from you. And I think we're seeing it. We're working on a completely different project together.
Yes.
And we've had to, it's different from anything we've done. We've had to find a totally new way of working.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, for me, that was an important reminder. And I liked, I would have just said you got to do it differently every time. And she came up with a beautiful, each project directs its own sail. I might need to write that somewhere more formal than my notes on this interview. What about you?
I really loved what she said about theatre for her posing a question at the beginning and an answer at the end. And it reminded me of the headlighting method that we've spoken about often, that many novelists are falling in love with these days, where you know the beginning of your project and you know the end, and you maybe know a few of the highlights along the way, and then the rest of it is a journey of discovery. And it seemed to me as though that encapsulated it, and it was just nice to hear it put in that way. It clarified something for me.
For me, it made me think of the short story as well. Because I think a short story very much often is, a short story, you've got to really be focused on a small event or a small amount of time, or a small question over a big amount of time. And there's a question answer process for me in a short story. I don't write them often, but when I do, I think without knowing, that's what's happening in my mind.
Yes. And for me, the best and most successful short stories are the ones that pose that question and answer it at the end.
And work in that circle.
Yes.
That you come back to where you started, in a sense.
Yes. Interesting. So if any of our listeners have read Nadia Davids' work, including the most recent book, Cape Fever, which is out now, it's in bookstores across the country, please get in touch with us. We're on all social media across the board, and we'd love to hear from you.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.